I begin the setup of the solo shot by focusing the camera on this tree line, specifically on the lighter green tree on the edge of it where it runs into the darker green trees to the right of it. That's roughly the center of the flying area left to right. When I first get to the field, I turn the tag on and set it out in the open so it can warm up while I'm getting the solo shot put together and the plane readied. Then with the tag in my hand, flat upright, I take it for a walk that's a bit over 200 paces. I'm not real sure what all this walking actually does for the tag, but they're emphatic about doing this and it seems to work. This part of the setup actually took about 3 minutes, but I just sped this up so we can get through it for now. After the 200 paces, I have to come back to the base unit. When I come back to the base unit, we hold the tag directly over the base and push the plus button on both of them together and the lights will start flashing. And then I take the tag out a little over 200 feet, point it back towards the base and push the button, and that calibrates the units. After calibrating, I hold the plus button down again until the green light flashes so I know that this recording has stopped for the time being. My Cub has this removable greenhouse. It makes a great place to put the tag. I'm using a simple hook and loop strap with a piece of foam underneath the tag to isolate it some from the vibrations of the plane, and this seems to work real good. And now with all the new equipment, from the first time I took off, it looked like the solo shot was following the plane much more closely. Naturally, since I was flying the plane, I could only glance over occasionally at the solo shot to see what it was doing, but it did look like it was following the plane a lot better than it used to. And it seemed to be tilting up quite a bit higher. And this is video from the solo shot. You can see that it's keeping the plane pretty well centered, and it's doing a lot better at tracking it as it climbs out. And I personally climbed up higher than I did before to see if it would follow it, and it stayed with it. All of these flying sequences were shot with a heavy gusty wind from right to left in this frame. And that accelerated some of the turns downwind. You can see that the solo shot loses it briefly. And here we'll pull it up into a gentle loop, and it just disappears again because it was already at the top of the frame, and I'm not real sure why that is. Then it goes out the bottom, comes back in. I purposely took the plane much higher than this several times, and the solo shot does track it up there, so it has enough vertical capacity. It's just the speed that it tracks the plane up and down is still a little slow. The solo shot also does a better job of tracking a plane when it's making a descending turn in for a low pass down the field. And it keeps the plane pretty well centered. On this climb out, the plane is struggling with the wind a little bit. You can see it almost loses it. We still need a little more vertical speed. Here we'll try another easy loop a little farther out, but it still goes out at the top, then out at the bottom. The vertical tracking is still getting behind. This figure 8 pattern has more up and down to it than I'd like because of all the wind. This plane really bounces around in those gusts. But you can see that the solo shot is doing a better job at keeping up with the plane. It loses it now and then, but for the most part it keeps it pretty well centered in the frame. If the folks at SoloShot can tighten up how quickly the camera responds to a change in direction, that would help this a ton. It's not real far off the way it is. My Cub certainly isn't a racer, but you can see in this wide open pass, the solo shot does a good job at keeping it in the center of the frame. And that's relatively close to the camera. And it follows it well through a climbing turn. Doing touch and goes in this kind of wind isn't very smart, but I love doing touch and goes, and the solo shot follows them very well. You can see that the zoom works well, it keeps the plane centered, and it tracks it as it goes by you. And you get to see your good landings. And here I pull it up a little harder than normal and put a roll in it, and the solo shot follows it pretty well. The last time we tried making this kind of video, the solo shot would have lost that plane easily. I also noticed that the solo shot was tracking the plane even close up after starting it. Before it didn't seem to do this. Being able to work closer like this just expands the envelope and what it'll all do. And here we try another close-in fast pass down the runway, and once again the SoloShot stays with it. Not bad at all. Because of how steady the SoloShot is, you get to see more of what the plane's doing when it's getting bounced around by the wind. And it's easier to tell when you make a mistake too, so you want to be careful with that. Here I took the plate up quite a bit higher than it had been and did a loop up there. And the SoloShot didn't do a bad job. It still lost it on the top and bottom, but not nearly as bad as it did before. The steadiness of the SoloShot lets you see how rough this approach really got. This end of our field can get some strange rolling gusts, and that just about caused me to lose control of this thing. This approach is a little more gradual, but it lets us see how well the SoloShot handles the zoom. Notice how it keeps the plane in the middle and how steady the plane is in terms of the size from the zoom. And it also shows you that I should land this thing and put it away before something bad happens. I almost aborted this landing attempt because it felt like the gusts were coming from the right and the left occasionally. And it was really bouncy all the way down to the ground. And right about here I felt the wind pick up dramatically from the left, and it was too late. It was already in the bounce. And we crunched a prop. I have to admit that I had been thinking about selling the SoloShot to a soccer mom or something because it seemed to work well for that kind of activities and not so good for RC airplanes. But now with the gear all working right and their latest update to the firmware, the SoloShot's not doing a bad job at all. Plus the way that they've been working on the firmware, I'm confident that they're going to get this thing sorted out even better. So if you like to make videos of your airplanes and you don't always have somebody that can handle a camera, you need to think about the SoloShot2. It's doing a good job right now, and I think you're going to get the rest of the bugs worked out before too long.